After that Wonder Woman episode, I am finally ready to do the rest of the Justice League members in one mega episode. The way this works is that I will go through each member of the team, like all the Green Lantern solo projects, then all the Flash solo project, and so on and so forth until I do all four members. Then I will do Justice League films, slash pilots, slash specials at the end of it. Sound good? Then let's go. The most incarnations in terms of the other Justice League members probably has to go to Green Lantern in terms of strictly films. Maybe The Flash has him beat, but I think Green Lantern personally. The first of which was actually WB confronting Kevin Smith in 1997 to script a Green Lantern film, but he turned it down. It got no farther than that. The second attempt was a pitch by Jeff Johns in 2000. He was, and still is, obviously, a big fan of the Green Lantern character and wanted to get a movie off the ground. He confronted producers about it, and the first thing they asked him was if Green Lantern could be made without the use of a power ring. Johns subsequently left because he was so disheartened and didn't try to make another attempt until The Dark Knight was released in 2008. The next attempt at a Green Lantern film was 4 years later and not based on any version from the comics and to be a lantern purely made for the film. The screenplay was written by SNL writer Robert Smigel. It pretty much revolves around a guy named Judd Plato who is a fucking idiot. He works in a department store, is gross, and overall a guy who has literally done nothing of note in his entire life, until fate comes a knocking where he is picked to become a Green Lantern. This is meant to be kind of funny because superhero stuff is all fictional in this world and is taken very seriously, so the jokes surrounding Plato can be all the quote unquote funnier. It's pretty much an origin story of Green Lantern if the Green Lantern in question was a piece of shit who didn't deserve the ring in the first place. The only person considered for the role of Plato was Jack Black, who signed on after reading the script. However, details of the script leaked to the public, and there was such a huge backlash from fans that WB ditched the idea. If you want more details, link to a deconstruction of the film in the description. There was another idea for a Green Lantern film a few years later, a treatment written by Corey Reynolds entitled Green Lantern: Birth of a Hero, which would have him writing and in the starring role as John Stewart and be the start of a trilogy. Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, and the Justice League would be introduced in subsequent films. Despite WB liking the treatment, it was abandoned for a film about Hal Jordan instead. Moving on to official films is Green Lantern in 2011. Before Ryan Reynolds was cast in the lead role, Sam Worthington and Chris Pine were considered. Brian Austin Green campaigned for the role. Justin Timberlake and Jared Leto did screen tests for the role, along with Bradley Cooper, who was Martin Campbell's only choice for the role. However, when Reynolds was cast, Campbell relentlessly treated him like shit because he couldn't get his way. He forced him to do tons of takes of scenes and berated him on his acting ability. Despite Reynolds doing a rather good job with the role, he was glad it never went anywhere due to his traumatic experiences with the film. It was also revealed that Clark Kent was supposed to have a name drop in the film as a contender for the ring, but producers decided against it due to them not wanting to rely on another big hero name for the film. There was also a plan to have Alan Scott in the film as the president, and later changed to the head of Checkmate until he was replaced with Amanda Waller. He was going to be played by Pierce Brosnan, of all people. Despite a lot of production issues like Greg Berlanti's original script getting ripped to shreds, or it barely resembled the original script anymore, or how the film was hacked up in editing, it's actually pretty okay. The film is not really that great overall, but it's still a decent action flick with a charismatic leading man and a decent story. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people say it is. However, due to the fact that this film bombed, all subsequent sequels and other planned films were cancelled. The sequel would have presumably have Sinestro as the villain, and it would have stated it would have probably been a trilogy and would have kicked off a cinematic universe. I also vaguely remember a Green Lantern slash Flash team up movie being announced as well, but I'm not sure if that's me misremembering something or if it was greenlit for like 2 seconds then ditched after this failed. Last but not least is Green Lantern Corps in 2020. I'm not sure what's happening with this movie since DC is kind of a mess right now, and there hasn't been a ton of info about it just yet. The only things we know for sure is that there was set to be a post-credit scene with Tomar Ray and Kilowog visiting Bruce Wayne in Justice League, as well as David S. Goyer and Justin Rhodes writing a script based on a story draft that Goyer and Jeff Johns wrote. Goyer is producing the film as well. Recent rumors is that Christopher McQuarrie might be in talks to direct the film, which could be really interesting since he did a pretty great job with the most recent Mission Impossible film, as well as the fact Fallout looking pretty damn good. We'll just have to wait and see. Moving on to The Flash. There was an attempt in the late 1980s to make a Flash film with famed comic book writer Jeff Loeb to write a screenplay, but nothing ever came of it. Next was the famous one-season TV series of The Flash in 1990 with John Wesley Shipp as Barry Allen. The series has become a cult classic in the eyes of many fans, despite not exactly following the comics all that much, mainly it being an episodic detective show. It borrowed a bit from the Wally West era, though, in terms of some characters, storylines, and villains. Then there was also a plan in 2003 for there to be a show on the WB about the Flash, which would have been next to nothing like the original character. The premise was going to be about the Flash being a recent college graduate and involve him going backwards and forwards through time on missions. It was heavily inspired by the 1960s series Time Tunnel. This is an absolutely hysterical concept considering that for the Flash, time travel is a big no-no, especially after the event of Flashpoint. Luckily, it never got off the ground. Next for film was going to be a Flash film directed, produced, and written by David S. Goyer after WB was impressed by his script for Batman Begins. It was to come out around the mid to late 2000s. Goyer allegedly wanted Ryan Reynolds for the role of Barry Allen after working with him on Blade Trinity, with Wally West being a supporting character. Goyer compared the tone of it to the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. By 2007, though, Goyer dropped out due to creative differences. The next film set to star the Flash was going to be a spin-off of the Justice League Mortal film that never materialized. It was meant to follow Wally West, the new Flash, after the death of Barry Allen in Justice League Mortal. It was set to be directed by Sean Levy, who then dropped out to focus on Night at the Museum Battle of the Smithsonian and was replaced by David Dobkin. However, after the plans for JLM fell through, WB still wanted to make a Flash film, so they hired Craig Wright to write a script for The Flash with a release date of 2008, but due to the writer's strike it never materialized. Then WB hired Charles Roven to produce, Jeff Johns to write a treatment, and to be consultant, with Dan Mazeau as screenwriter. However, eventually in 2010, this fell through as WB had started to develop plans for the DCEU. However, in 2010, Greg Berlanti started to work on a Flash film with Mark Guggenheim, and this would later morph into the TV series. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the series because this is mainly supposed to focus on film, but I'll still give you some behind the scenes details. Originally, Barry Allen was supposed to be introduced through a trilogy of episodes on Arrow, with the last of which being a backdoor pilot for the character of the Flash. However, CW executives were so impressed with Barry Allen on Arrow that they made the backdoor pilot into a full-fledged traditional pilot. Because of this, the Flash team didn't have to be forced to use Arrow's characters in said backdoor pilot. There were some details about the original backdoor pilot, though, that did get surfaced after everything was said and done. Originally, Caitlin Snow was supposed to be much older and intended to be a love interest for Harrison Wells, as well as the fact that her original dead fiancé was Kyle Nimbus, the Mist, who was intended to be the original villain of the episode. Also, that Rick Cosnett was supposed to be Jake Garrick rather than Eddie Thawne. Then there was Hartley Rathaway, who was supposed to be a part of Team Flash and the original person to develop the suit rather than Cisco. However, we got a traditional pilot instead, and the show is better for it, although it would have been interesting to see Rick Cosnett as Jay Garrick. Now, all that's left is the upcoming Flashpoint film. First and foremost was that Phil Lord and Chris Miller wrote a story treatment for the film. WP tried to get them to direct, but they were off directing the Han Solo film at the time before they were booted in favor of Ron Howard. Seth Graham Smith was then picked to direct the film, but he then dropped out due to creative differences. Rick Famuyiwa, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, director of the indie hit Dope, was then hired to direct, but also dropped out due to creative differences in late 2016 and was left in suspended animation for a while, as well as the fact that it would not reach its original March 2018 release date. During this time, though, it was announced that it wouldn't just be a Flash solo film, but an adaptation of the highly overrated Flashpoint storyline. It was reported that Robert Zemeckis, along with Matthew Vaughn and Sam Raimi, were on the shortlist to direct the film, as well as Mark Webb. However, John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein were eventually picked earlier this year. While I am adamant about these two directing since they majorly fucked up with writing Spider-Man Homecoming, they did a pretty solid job with directorial duties for the film Game Night, which was pretty funny. However, not a lot of news in regards to what will happen next, with the exception of a rumor that it's actually not going to be a Flashpoint adaptation and instead going to be a regular Flash solo film, which I do hope for. Now on to Aquaman. Unfortunately, in terms of solo endeavors, Aquaman's stamp is almost non-existent. In terms of all types of canceled projects and actually made projects, there's only been one of each. The first of which is the failed TV pilot in 2006 that stars Justin Hartley before he was cast as Green Arrow on Smallville. It takes place in the Florida Keys rather than the fictional town of Amnesty Bay like in the comics. The pilot revolves around Arthur figuring out who he is, where he came from, and what his powers are. It was meant to take inspiration from the classic Golden Age mythology of Aquaman. So instead of battling people like King Shark and Black Manta, he would be battling more ocean/environmental pollutant threats like Captain fucking Planet. The first season was all planned out like it was a surefire thing to happen, but after the WB merged with UPN and became the CW, CW opted not to go with the series. As I stated before, Hartley went on to be Oliver Queen/Green Arrow on Smallville during its sixth season, so lucky for him, he got another chance at being a superhero. The other project is the upcoming Aquaman movie coming out this December. It's to take place after the events of Justice League. Jason Momoa will be reprising his role from Justice League, as well as Amber Heard as Mera, who had a small role in the film. Patrick Wilson will be playing the villain Orm, also known as the Ocean Master, with Yahya Abdul-Mateen II, who will be playing Black Manta, who will be teased throughout. A-listers like Willem Dafoe and Nicole Kidman will also be in the film, along with famous action star Dolph Lundgren. The apparent summary of the film will be Arthur being caught in between the war between the surface dwellers and Atlantis as the new ruler of Atlantis. However, I found this on Wikipedia, so take that with a grain of salt. I have a lot of faith in James Wan because he's a great director and one of the few people in the industry who gives a shit about his craft. Last but certainly not least is Martian Manhunter. Get the fuck out of here, Cyborg. Now, Martian Manhunter hasn't had a lot of adaptations similar to Aquaman, so this will be very short. The only time that Martian Manhunter has been in something that wasn't Justice League related was on Supergirl. Yeah, I know. On this show, John Jones took the form of a man named Hank Henshaw, who was an agent of the DEO and tried to kill John, but Hank was killed instead. He then assumes his identity as the head of the DEO, also known as the Department of Extraterrestrial Operations. He is portrayed as the last son of Mars, similar to his post-crisis origin, and the last surviving Green Martian, until Season 2 that is. Unfortunately though, this character is very nerfed and the showrunners don't even try to hide this. Mainly because they don't want Jones to be more powerful than the main protagonist, which kinda sucks because Jones is one of the most powerful characters in DC Comics, arguably more powerful than Superman if it wasn't for his dumb weakness. As I stated, this is literally the only live action adaptation of the character outside of Justice League related media, so moving on, I guess? Alright, So now we get into official Justice League projects. The first of which was a so bad it's hilarious two-part TV special in 1979. This Justice League of America is comprised of Batman and Robin, being played once again by Adam West and Burt Ward, Captain Marvel, played by Garrett Craig, Green Lantern, played by Howard Murphy, The Flash, played by Rod Haas, Hawkman, played by Bill Knuckles, Huntress, played by Barbara Joyce, Adam, played by Alfie Wise, and Black Canary, played by Danuta Wesley. The first part of the special involved the Justice League visiting a made-for-special retired hero called Scarlet Cyclone. I assume it's a reference to Red Tornado, who is celebrating his birthday. It's only then do the Legion of Doom show up, comprised of the Riddler, Weather Wizard, Sinestro, Mordru, Dr. Sivana, Giganta, and Solomon Grundy, to crash the party and reveal to the heroes that they planted a bomb in the building and set up clues for the heroes so they can find it. It's actually all a trap, though, so that the heroes can drink a depower potion. But the heroes save the day anyway, and everything is taken care of. The second part is just a roast of all the heroes hosted by Ed McMahon. It's dumb, but it was the 70s, so what do you expect? The next was a failed TV pilot in 1997, simply titled Justice League of America. It is one of the poorest excuses of a Justice League adaptation ever. First things first, it doesn't have the Trinity due to licensing issues, which is a major disappointment. But kind of expected because the inspiration for the team was Justice League International, which only had Batman and not Superman or Wonder Woman as part of the initial lineup. However, that is the least of the pilot's worries. The costumes are an absolute joke. Not Who's Afraid of Diana Prince bad, but holy hell do they look awful. It looks like they got a bunch of costumes from Party City, glued some rubber and plastic pieces onto them, and boom, there you go. The lineup of this version of the JLA is Guy Gardner, Green Lantern, played by Matthew Settle, who acts absolutely nothing like the Gardner version of Green Lantern. They literally only share name and uniform, and that's it. Then there is Ray Palmer as the Atom, played by John Kaser, who is a fucking nerd. Like, somehow more so than the Brandon Routh version. I get that they were trying to make him look unassuming, but there's a difference between Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man unassuming and making him look like the middle-aged version of someone from Revenge of the Fucking Nerds. Just put some glasses and a bow tie on Booger, and there you go. Then there's Fire, played by Michelle Hurd, who looks mediocre, not awful, just dumb and cheap. Then there's The Flash, played by Kenny Johnston, who is ungodly annoying and somehow unemployed, despite the fact that everyone knows he's a forensic analyst for the police, but whatever. Lastly is David Ogden Stiers as Martian Manhunter, who doesn't appear until much later in the pilot. The makeup looks decent on him, but Stiers was a rather large man, and because of that, he looks pretty silly. The plot centers around a woman named Tori Olafsdottir, who gains ice powers and throughout the episode helps out the Justice League until she becomes a full-fledged member in the end. The villain isn't someone like Brainiac or Amazo or Darkseid, but it's a guy called the Weatherman, played by the late Miguel Ferrer. He's literally just Weather Wizard, but dumber. Like the guy that Flash handled all by himself in the pilot of his show. Yeah, great choice there, dipshits. Overall, it's a dumb pilot with bad effects, a bad villain, a bad story, bad costumes, and a poor adaptation of the Justice League and poor translations of great core members like the Flash, Green Lantern, and Martian Manhunter. Next up is Smallville. Didn't expect me to talk about this one now, did ya? Well, I decided to give it a mention because it technically has a Justice League adaptation. In the show, the quote-unquote Justice League is made up of Clark Kent, Impulse, Bart Allen, Aquaman, Arthur Curry, Cyborg, Victor Stone, and Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, in the Season 6 episode Justice. Eventually, Black Canary is added as well. Eventually, in the Smallville Season 11 comic book series, the Justice League becomes more like its comic book counterpart with a lineup of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Green Arrow, John Stewart, Green Lantern, Martian Manhunter, and Red Tornado. Although there are some differences, but still closer to the original lineup. Now is the moment you've all been waiting for. Time to talk about Justice League Mortal. I mentioned it in my previous history ofs, but now I can go into full detail about the Justice League film we should have gotten. First off, some behind the scenes. At around the same time in 2007, WB was disappointed with the numbers from Superman Returns, as well as canceling Joss Whedon's Wonder Woman film and David S. Goyer leaving the Flash project. WB asked Michelle and Kieran Mulroney to write a script for a Justice League film. It was titled Justice League Mortal, and when submitted to WB, received unanimous praise. With this, they wanted to fast track production before the upcoming writer's strike. Due to WB being disappointed with how Superman Returns turned out, they weren't really ready to greenlight a Superman Returns sequel, nor did they ask Routh to reprise his role in this film, being more focused to start a new franchise with this film, which also meant Bale not being asked to reprise his role either. They also planned a bunch of sequels and spin-offs, and that also never went anywhere. Jason Reitman was confronted to direct the project but turned it down, and in September of 2007, George Miller was signed on to direct with a projected $220 million budget. Many actors auditioned for the various roles in the project, like Joseph Cross, Michael Angarano, Max Thieriot, Minka Kelly, Adrian Palicki, and Scott Porter, although it was never clearly stated what roles these characters were auditioning for. Jessica Biel turned down the role of Wonder Woman, and Teresa Palmer, Shannon Sossamon, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead were all considered / auditioned for the role. However, Palmer was eventually cast as Talia al Ghul instead. As I stated in previous episodes, DJ Catrona was cast as Superman, Armie Hammer was cast as Batman, and Megan Gale was eventually cast as Wonder Woman. They originally offered the role of Jon Stewart to Columbus Short, but I assume he turned it down, and hip-hop artist Common was cast instead. Adam Brody was cast as a Flash, and Jay Baruchel was cast as Maxwell Lord. Hugh Keays-Byrne, a longtime George Miller collaborator, was cast in an unknown role, rumored and then eventually confirmed to be Martian Manhunter. While for many years the role of Aquaman was thought to be left unaccounted for, it was revealed that Santiago Cabrera was actually cast in the role, stated long after the film was cancelled. In terms of other roles, Anton Yelchin was cast as Wally West, and Zoe Kazan was cast as Iris West, or Iris Allen, since they were married in the script. However, at this point, things were going to go downhill really quickly. During pre-production, the writer's strike was in full effect, which put the film on hold. In February of 2008, the production fast-tracked yet again after the strike ended. Miller wanted to film immediately, but the production was delayed once again. The film was intended to be shot in Fox Studios Australia, but despite Megan Gale, Teresa Palmer, and Hugh Keays-Byrne, and the entire production crew being Australian, the Australian Film Committee thought that there weren't enough Australian actors in the film, as they also had a say in the casting choices. It was because of this that they denied WB their 40% tax rebate. This also made Miller extremely angry because it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that the AFC was ruining over something so minor. The production was eventually moved to Vancouver in mid-2008, hoping to start filming in July to get a release in the summer of 2009. However, after the success of The Dark Knight, WB decided that they should focus on making films about individual heroes rather than team films with big universes, which proved to be the biggest mistake ever, since a little film called Iron Man also debuted that year, along with another tiny film being The Incredible Hulk. You all know where that went. It was eventually canceled, with them fast-tracking production 2009 to 2010 with Green Lantern, which, as we all know, was a big disappointment. Now, I've read the script for JLM, and I can confidently say that this film could have been really awesome. The only worry I have is that the cast members were a bit too young to be playing veteran heroes. I understand why they were chosen, but it just sounds a bit too off to me personally. With the exception of Anton Yelchin, who at the time was probably a perfectly cast Wally West. Also, a few months ago, some concept art and promo photos were released, and some of it is actually not half bad. They did look a bit cheap looking, but it made sense because of it only being concept art. Now, let's get into the story. As I stated, the villain was set to be Maxwell Lord, played by Jay Baruchel. or Baruchel, however the fuck you pronounce it, who probably would have given off a Jesse Eisenberg as a Lex Luthor kind of vibe. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing depends on the person. The script was heavily inspired by the JLA Tower of Babel storyline by Mark Waid, which involves Batman keeping secret data of weaknesses on his fellow heroes. This information is eventually stolen by Ra's al Ghul so that he can defeat the League so that they won't interfere with his latest scheme. However, in the script, it's Maxwell Lord and Talia al Ghul rather than Ra's al Ghul. Hell, even the specific weaknesses for heroes like Martian Manhunter, Aquaman, Green Lantern, and the Flash all come from the original JLA storyline. It also has the villainous AI developed by Batman in the story, Brother Eye. I think each hero is very much like their comic book counterpart in many ways, like Superman, with him being the hopeful hero that represents everything good, Batman being the grizzled loner that who doesn't trust anyone, Wonder Woman is the hero all about peace and love and fights when she needs to, Green Lantern is a steadfast and tough hero, and Martian Manhunter is the strong and intelligent voice of reason. The only ones that are kinda iffy are Flash, who, despite being Barry Allen, is more like Wally West in terms of being the funny hero, and Aquaman has a lot of resentment towards humanity and the surface dwellers. However, what makes this script so great is that it's more so about the characters and them becoming a team rather than the threat of Maxwell Lord, which only comes into play during the climax. It's a well written script and has that very comic book vibe about it that makes it a fun read. It has its corny moments, but I think it just adds to the whole vibe of the story. I highly recommend reading the script. The link will be in the description. However, if you don't want to read an entire script, there's another link that is just a synopsis. At the end of the film, Starro, the first villain of the Justice League, is teased. Now, moving on to the Justice League we unfortunately got. In late 2014, WB released their slate for future films in the upcoming DCEU: Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad for 2016, Wonder Woman and Justice League for 2017, The Flash and Aquaman for 2018, Shazam and Justice League 2 for 2019, and Cyborg and Green Lantern Corps for 2020. It was all so simple. In Batman vs. Superman, both Batman and Wonder Woman were introduced, and Aquaman, Flash, and Cyborg received little promos for Justice League, albeit some retconning in terms of Cyborg's backstory in Justice League. After being impressed with his work on Batman vs. Superman, WB hired Chris Terrio to write Justice League, replacing David S. Goyer, who wrote Man of Steel and co-wrote BVS along with Terrio. Originally, the film was supposed to be split into two separate films, part 1 being in 2017 and part 2 being in 2019, but that plan was scrapped soon after the negative reception of Batman vs. Superman. In mid-2016, filming was started on Justice League, and many people stated that Justice League would be simpler and more hopeful and optimistic due to the negative reception for Batman vs. Superman. Infamously, during post-production, Zack Snyder's daughter had committed suicide, and he left his duties as director to be with his family, and Joss Whedon was chosen to take his place through the rest of the post-production process, which included the infamous reshoots and editing. It was eventually announced that it would only be 2 hours long, which left a ton of material on the cutting room floor, which was supported due to leaked scenes after the film came out of many arcs regarding individual characters. My theory is this. After Blade Runner 2049 bombed at the box office, with the main complaint being that it had a really long running time, Kevin Sugihara forced Justice League to only be 2 hours long. According to many sources, there was actually a tease of Darkseid in the film, as well as the previously mentioned cameos from Kilowog and Tomar-Re that was eventually scrapped but never filmed. So what we got was a hacked up mess of a film, which probably won't get an extended cut, even though everyone is clamoring for it. Due to it being recent and not cancelled, I don't feel like I need to explain the plot for this one. In terms of Justice League 2, it's up in the air at this point, and we definitely know for sure that Zack Snyder isn't coming back, so we'll just have to wait and see. So, that was my mega special on Green Lantern, Flash, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and the Justice League. I hope to do more history ofs in the future. I'm kind of leaning towards Captain America due to the numerous adaptations he has gotten, but who knows?